Today we are going to learn a new lesson from your supplementary reader, The Enemy. It was written by Pearl S. Buck. What's S stands for? Her full name is Pearl Sidon Stryker Buck. Most of the time she is spent in China. She is actually the daughter of missionaries. She was born in 1892 and died in 1973. She has another name, that is a Chinese name, Tsai Sahan-Zu. That's a Chinese name. She actually received so many awards and all. The lesson The Enemy published in 1942. She was the first American woman who received the Nobel Prize for Literature. Pearl S. Buck was not just a successful author but also a tireless activist for multiculturalism and who did much to bring about the acceptance of multiracial adoptions in America. She was famous for writing about Chinese people, and here in this particular lesson she had written about Japanese people. Clear? Enemy. The lesson Enemy is not about a particular culture or ethnic group or nationality. It is about a doctor called Sado Hoki. Here we go. It is the time of the World War. You know that during the World War, how many almost 30 countries involved in the war, and the background of the story is the Second World War. Japan is at war with America. It is the time of World War. An American prisoner of war is washed ashore in a dying state and is found at the doorstep of a Japanese doctor. Should he save him as a doctor or hand him over to the army as a patriot? That's a question the author is asking. So, before becoming the doctors are supposed to take an oath, isn't it? The patients are their family. That's what they used to say during their oath. So, here the doctor is Japanese. So, that time they were enemies, America and the Japanese, isn't it? So, whether the doctor will save whom? The enemy. That's what we have to find out. Here we go. Dr. Sado Hoki's house was built on a spot of the Japanese coast where as a little boy he had often played. There is his house. It was built on a spot. Spot means place of the Japanese coast. Coast means shore, seashore, where as a little boy he had often played. Where he used to play as a small child. The place where he played as a child, this particular area, they built a house. See, the low square stone house was set upon rocks well above a narrow beach that was outlined with bent pines. The low square stone house was set upon. Set upon means established. Then a low square stone, the house was established. That was outlined. Outlined here it is means stood in rows. What was there in row? It was the pine trees were there. So, surrounded by what? Pine trees. As a boy, Sado had climbed the pines, supporting himself on his bare feet as he had seen men do in the South Seas when they climb for coconuts. Now, here in our place, southern side, people how they used to climb the coconut tree. The same way, who used to climb the pine trees? Dr. Sado as a boy used to climb the pine trees, supporting himself. Supporting himself means holding himself. His father had taken him often to the islands of those seas, and never had he failed to say to the little brave boy at his side, "Those islands yonder, they are the stepping stones, the future for Japan." As a child, the father used to take him outside and he used to take him to the islands. So, and what he used to tell the child, those islands yonder, yonder means over there, they are the stepping stones, the future for Japan. They are the first steps for the Future of whom? For the Japans. That's what who used to say? The Japanese, that is the stepping stone. Who used to say? The father used to tell the doctor. Where shall we step from them? Sado asked seriously. As a child, he used to ask, where shall we step from them? Then the father used to give the answer. Who knows? His father had answered, who can limit our future? Limit means restrict. It depends on what we make it. It depends on us. Nobody can stop you to become a very special personality. That was the answer given by his father. Sado had taken this into his mind as he did everything his father said. His father, who never joked or played with him, but who spent infinite pains upon him, who was his only son. Sado had taken this into his mind. His father said that nobody could stop his future. So that was in his mind as he did everything his father said. He was actually ready to follow the instructions given by his father, and he was not a very jovial person. He was very serious. He never played with him, he never joked with him, but who spent infinite means endless pains upon him, who was his only son. He was ready to take any pain for whom? For his son. Sado knew that his education was his father's chief concern. Chief concern means main worry. Who was worried about Sado's education? His father was worried. For this reason, he had been sent at 22 to America to learn all that could be learned of surgery and medicine. Actually, when Sado completed 22 years old, he was sent to America in order to learn what? In order to learn about surgery and medicine. He had come back at 30. When he completed 30 years old, he came back to Japan, and before his father died, he had seen Sado become famous not only as a surgeon but as a scientist. The father had seen him grown as a scientist as well as a doctor, because he was perfecting a discovery which would render wounds entirely clean. He had not been sent abroad with the troops because he was perfecting. He was perfecting means he was nearing completion a discovery. What was the discovery? Which would render, which would make, render means make, wounds entirely clean, completely clean. He had not been sent abroad with the troops. Troops means with the army. Actually, he was in the part of a Japan army. So he was not sent for the war. Why? Because he was completing his discovery. That's why he was staying back. Also, he knew there was some slight danger that the old general might need an operation for a condition for which he was now being treated medically, and for this possibility, Sado was being kept in Japan. There are two reasons he was not sent for the war. Why? The one is he is about to complete his discovery. The second one is one of his senior officer who was very sick, who wanted an operation. For that operation, who is needed? Dr. Sado is needed. That's why Sado was kept in Japan. He was not sent for the war. Clear? Next paragraph. Clouds were rising from the ocean now. The unexpected warmth of the past few days had at night drawn heavy fog from the cold waves. Clouds were rising from the ocean now. Now you could see the clouds are coming up in the ocean. The unexpected warmth. Warmth means heat. Heat of the past few days had at night drawn heavy fog. Because of the heat, what you could see? The fog you could see from the cold waves. Sado watched mist hide outlines of a little island near the shore and then come creeping up the beach below the house, wreathing around the pines. So Sado, another thing he noticed was the mist. Mist, you all know, the water droplets in the air. That is, mist is hide outlines of the little island. The island, the father used to show him, isn't it? There is an outline is formed because of the mist. Not only that, and it is creeping up to the beach. It is coming towards the beach below the house and wreathing around the pines. Wreathing means covering the around the pines. in a few minutes, fog would be wrapped about the house. He was expected within few minutes the house will be completely covered by the fog. Then he would go into the room where Hannah, his wife, would be waiting for him with the 2 children. So when the story began, the doctor is married, his wife's name is Hannah, he is having 2 children also. So then now he is planning to go back to the inside the house. But at this moment, he was about to turn and go back inside the house. He had seen, what did he see? But at this moment, the door opened and she looked out a dark blue woolen haori over her kimono. So now she had seen a lady is coming out. She was wearing a dark blue woolen haori. Haori is a loose outer garment, frock type garment over her kimono. Kimono is the Japanese dress. And she came to him affectionately, very lovingly she was approaching him and put her arm through his as he stood, smiled and said nothing. So his wife is outside and she joined him. He had met Hannah in America. Where did they meet? The Dr. Sado met his wife at America, but he had waited to fall in love with her until he was sure she was Japanese. Dr. Sado was attracted towards this lady, but first he made sure that this lady is from Japan, because his father is very particular of getting married to a Japanese lady. His father would never have received her unless she had been pure in her race. That's the reason. So he wondered often whom he would have married if he had not met Hannah. He used to think at times if he had not met Hannah, whom he should have married. And by what luck he had found her in the most casual way, by chance, literally at an American professor's house. Here the author is speaking about where doctor met Hannah. The doctor met Hannah in the same way where at an American professor's house. By chance only he went to visit an American professor there who was also there. Hannah was also there. The professor and his wife had been kind people, anxious to do something for their few foreign students, and the students, though bored, had accepted this kindness. Actually, one of the professor very kind. He was an American. He was very kind towards the foreign students, even though the students are not keen, but still they used to accept his kindness. Sado had often told Hannah how nearly he had not gone to Professor Harley's house that night, that particular night when they met at Professor's house. Actually, Hannah was not in a mood to visit whose house? The professor's house, but the rooms. Why? The reason is also there. The rooms were so small. The professor's house rooms are very small, and the food so bad. The food is also not good. The professor's wife so voluble. Voluble means very talkative. The reasons he told Hannah where the professor's house is not so big, the food was not so good, the food so bad, that means not so good. The professor's wife was very talkative. That's why the foreign students not interested to visit their house. But he had gone, and there he had found Hannah, a new student, and had felt he would love her if it were at all possible. So when there he went, and he met whom? Met his wife Hannah there. She was a new student there, and he found out, it is written that if it were at all possible, that means as first he was attracted towards this lady, but there is a condition. The father told him he will marry only a Japanese girl. So first he found out whether this girl is belonging to Japan. Understood? Now he felt her hand on his arm. Now this is the recollection how he met her. Now at present the present situation is both of them are standing outside the house holding their hands, and was aware of the pleasure it gave him, even though they had been married years enough to have 2 children. Even though they are married for a long time, they have 2 children, but still they are very loving. For they had not married heedlessly in America. Heedlessly means without paying attention. They did not get married at America. They had finished their work at school and had come home to Japan. They came back to Japan, and when his father had seen her, the marriage had been arranged in the old Japanese way, although Sado and Hannah had talked everything over beforehand. It is love cum arranged marriage, isn't it? Because before marriage itself, Sado told everything to whom? Everything to Hannah about his father, and father met her and they arranged the marriage in a proper Japanese way. They were perfectly happy. They are very happy couple. She laid her cheek against his arm. It was at this moment that suddenly they had seen something. What was that? Both of them saw something black come out of the mist. Suddenly they had seen something is coming out of the mist. It was a man. Then they realized that it was a man. He was flung up out of the ocean. Flung means thrown out of the ocean. Flung, it seemed, to his feet by a breaker. He staggered a few steps. He could hardly, he was thrown from the water and he was staggering. He was literally staggering, not taking proper steps, and his body outlined against the mist, because it was a little far away, isn't it? It could, their body could be make out because there was an outline formed by the mist. His arms above his head, then the curled mist hid him again. Then the mist is completely covered him and they could not see him at all. Who is that? Hannah cried. Suddenly Hannah asked, who is that? She dropped Sado's arm and they both leaned. Leaned means bent over the railing of the veranda. Now they saw him again. Then they just leaned and see who was that? Then they had seen him again. The man was on his hands and knees crawling. He can't even stand properly. He was literally crawling. And then they saw him fall on his face and lie there. Then they had seen him. He was falling on his face and he was lie down on the ground. A fisherman perhaps, Sado said. Then now Sado thought that it must be a fisherman. He must be watched from his boat. He ran quickly down the steps and behind him Hannah came. He rushed towards that man who fell down, who also followed him. His wife also followed him. Her white sleeves flying. While he was running behind her husband, the dress was literally flying. A mile or two away on either side there were fishing villages, but here was only the bare and lonely coast. A mile or two away, 1 or 2 miles away, there is a village where who used to stay? The fishermen used to stay. But here where they were staying was only bare and lonely coast. Nobody was there. And dangerous also. Why? A lot of rocks are there on the coast. The surf beyond the beach was spiked with rocks, and somehow the man have managed to come through them. He must be badly torn because it is spiked with rocks. Everywhere it is what? Completely covered by rocks. So what happens if you fall on the rocks? What will happen? A lot of wounds will be there. That's why he must be badly torn, badly wounded. So the doctor and the lady wife, both of them thought that the man must have wounded very badly because he fell on the rocks. They saw when they came towards him that indeed it was so. Yes, their thought was completely correct. When they reached, the man was completely wounded. See, the sand on one side of him. One side he was completely covered with sand and had already stain of red soaking through. Stain of means completely the mark, full of mark. What mark it was? The blood, the bleeding. The man was completely bleeding. I hope you understood. Please read the lesson. If you have doubt, you can contact me. Thank you.